Our Mayor, Dr. Kumar has left, my colleagues, even my former colleagues from DUT. It's good to see again after about 10 years. Maybe before I start, I think I should make a confession. I remember 10 or 11 years ago, while working at DUT, we had this young guy who was one of our students. Back then at DUT, we had about 2,000 students and there were about 4 of us teaching economics. So we were sharing scripts. However, each person would make a question and give to another lecturer. And remember, when you write an exam, you don't put your name, just put a student number. But there was always this student, when you mark his script, you're not looking for an answer, looking for a mistake. Because if you ask something for 10 marks, he'll give you 20. And at most of the time, he will be scoring more than 100%. So we'll be looking for a mistake so it can downgrade him to more than 100%. And that student happened to be here today. He's a program director. And I even went to another lecturer teaching accounting. And I complained about the student. He said, Mr. Twala, I have the same problem. So I'm not surprised. Back then he was having black hair. I'm not sure what happened now. Maybe you guys from the municipalities are giving him troubles. But I must confess he was a very good student back then. Actually, marking his scripts was like sitting at the beach, relaxing, unlike compared to other students. Well, that is history. We're here today. I will be talking about the economic outlook, and these are the topics that I will be trying to look at, and I'm glad that Dr. Kumar has touched upon most of the topics. However, I will further extend my discussion looking at global, national and provincial, trying to also link why are the economic activities happening abroad affecting us directly in KZN or in South Africa. There's currently this so-called trade war. It is a war indeed between China and US, and I'll try to share some examples as to why we must worry and how it is going to affect us. I think I'll also look at one of the countries, Turkey, which was severely affected in 2009 recession, and I came out using bailouts from, but again, since the beginning of this year, the country is back in crisis again. So I'll look at its example and see what we can learn from them. So one of the main issues we need to worry about for international economy is because we have trade relationship with these countries. We produce and sell to them, and they produce and sell to us. As a result, we need to clearly understand what is happening there, because in one way or another, they affect us either directly or indirectly in terms of export or imports, or in terms of balance of trade. So I will try to look at the global picture. I like this picture for one reason. If you look at the lines here, you can see that there's huge level of development taking place. And again, political stability there is very, very strong. It's Japan. And if you go again to this side, let me start from the north, North Korea. I think I started to follow North Korea in 2008. I was reading the magazine called The Economist. The president of the country back then was 28 years old, soon after having graduated from USA. And the title was Dictator in Waiting. And I was like, oh, who's this young man? He was very young. Then from then, I started following him. And soon after that, his dad passed away and he took over as the president of the country. And I was so disappointed of him because he learned from USA. I was hoping that he was going to introduce some changes that will make that country develop economically. But apparently he's following at the footsteps of his father. You can see the level of development there is very, very dim, indicating that economic activity is constrained there because of political instability. Meanwhile, South Korea, I love this country because if you look at history, 1950 after World War, Korea had nothing, South Korea had nothing. It was poor, it had no resources whatsoever. It is one of the poorest countries in the world. However, because of dedication by the political leadership, they took a stand. They went to IMF and World Bank, they borrowed money. What they did with that money, they ensured that they spent on infrastructure, they spent on technology, they spent on education. If you go to their capital city, you see the light there, right? What's it called? South. They created a freeway from South to Busan, another beautiful city. If you go to Busan now, there's a freeway, 3 layers, one up on top of another. And the level of unemployment there is close to 5%. GDP, South Korea is one of the best countries in the world in terms of economic performance. This country is number 11. From nothing, from zero. They don't even have mineral resources that we have in Africa, but they do. But they perform economically. So maybe you can learn more from them. And if you look, obviously, in Europe, you can see the lights are bright in Russia. There's high level of economic development and there's high level of economic performance. So having said so, I want you to look at, I like one commentator said, in South Africa, it's like we are scoring our own goal. If you track history, you will see that after recession in 2009, most economies are now recovering at a very faster pace. You look at the global economy, we expect it to grow by 3.9%, even advanced to 2.4%, even emerging economies, 4.9%, and in emerging economies, just group 4, which is Russia, China, simply because of Brexit. And you can see again that Russia, from 2 consecutive recessions, 2 years in recession, they are back now. They grew by 1.7 last year, they were expected to grow by 1.7 again. Look at India. India is one of the poorest countries in the world. If you go to India, especially the northern side of Gujarat, you'll see how poverty is. But people, they are working hard. And look at the economic performance, they are now overtaking China. We expect India's economy to grow by 7.3%, far above 6.6% in China. You'll see China later on in my other slide. Brazil, they had serious economic problems. Again, it was a negative growth rate, 2 years of recession, but they're back. But what happened to South Africa? 1.5%. That figure it came out in June, before July, yes. 1.7, but if you look at the Reserve Bank, it says the country will grow by 1.2%. I was reading last night, one of the prestigious financial institutions, Goldman Sachs. If you remember 2007, when we had financial crisis in America, most banks were bankrupt. This was the only bank that survived. And Goldman Sachs is a very good bank, and make no mistake, these guys, at the beginning of the year, they focused or they projected South Africa to grow by 2%. But after Tuesday's announcement by Stats, they revised all the way from 2% to 0.8%, less than 1%. So you can see clearly how bad is the situation. If you are a comrade runner, the up run, if you look at Drummond's, the top hill there, you look up there and say, oh my God, what I was doing. We are like facing Drummond's hill now as a country because of what is happening economically. So I won't spend time talking about the global economy, but I want to talk about the trade war in China and the US. And I'm very specific here because we have a trade relationship within China. In March this year, Trump, I don't know who advises Trump or he listens to his advisors very well. Actually, I heard this morning that some of them are contemplating to overthrow him. I'm not too sure whether it's correct. But in early this year, around March, he pronounced that he intends imposing 25% tariffs on all goods imported from China. And those goods are worth about 50 billion per annum. It's a huge amount. Imagine, we read in Economics 101, international trade, David Ricardo's theory, competitive advantage, comparative advantage, that is each country must trade with another country, concentrate on what it is good at, and focus on that and export. But Mr. Trump is trying to reverse that. He's imposing tariffs. We are talking about globalization, but he's reversing that. And the worry is we trade extensively with both China and US. And again, we have trade and political relationship with China. In US, we have got something called AGOA, the poultry industry. I work in Pietermaritzburg. When I drive to Pietermaritzburg, on the left-hand side is a rainbow factory that is closing down because of the cheap imports of cheap metal coming from the rest of the world. So the AGOA is an act that is protecting those countries that are trading with US. Trump is threatening to withdraw South Africa from that agreement, whereby we have a free flow of goods and services. And again, judging from what he's doing, really, we are heading for a disaster or a pandemonium. If you look at what is happening in terms of trade between China and the rest of the world, we've got this index called World Container Index. Ever since, that trend has been increasing at an increasing rate. But after Trump announced in March, though we still have growth in terms of container at ports, but that increment is increasing at a decreasing rate. So you can see clearly that there is an impact in terms of trade, because that is how you measure the trade. If the containers coming to the harbor are decreasing, you must know that there's something wrong happening in trade. So because of what he said, we see exactly what is happening in terms of trade, by looking at the volumes of goods that are coming into our harbors or global harbor ports. And again, if you look again in terms of the service trading, you will see that between China and US, you'll find that there's more of exports from UK going to China, and there's more imports in terms of $1 billion going between China and trade. So what will happen in this trade relationship if Trump goes ahead with his dilemma of imposing tariffs? Again, if you look in terms of merchandise, raw material and product between the two countries, China is leading, but goods and services and merchandise worth about 506. That will also be affected if Trump goes ahead with his decision. The same goes with the trade deficit. So if you look at history, backwards, China was leading in terms of economic growth. At some point, it was growing about 18%, 1995. Prior to crisis, it was growing at around 10 or 14%. But after recession, it's going down. And according to IX Market, they expect the economy of China to grow by around 5%. Imagine from double digit to less than 5% in terms of growth rate. And you'll see this, how this is affecting South Africa. In terms of debts, we know that we are all indebted. In terms of China, the total debt as a percentage of GDP is about 250%. If you look at this, yes, 220%, sorry. To 50%. That is the total of debts that is owed by China to the rest of the world. However, part of those debts are in a business, not in household as it is in South Africa, not in government as it is in South Africa. Again, if you look at it, though there's nothing wrong with borrowing, as long as you borrow and spend it in capital formation, etc. So, how are we trading with China? If you look at the top 5 countries that we import goods from, 17% of our trades our imports in South Africa are coming from China. And if the economy of China is decreasing, as you saw, how do you think are going to buy our goods? What do you think will happen to the employees that are working for those companies that they buy from? What will happen to their members or members of their families? What will happen to the economy of South Africa? 17% of GDP, that's a lot. It's, I think, 3.2 trillion. So 17% is a lot of money that you trade in China. So you saw the trend. China's economy is going down. So that will affect our trade our imports from China. If you look at the exports again, I pick up the top 5. See again, China is number 1. Of all the goods that we sell to the rest of the world, 9% goes to China. And the US is 7.4%. So these two countries, really, whatever they do, we are in one way or another affected. So we need to do something to avoid this. But what can we do? Because we're a small player in the global field. So I try to look at the China and US and how it's going to affect South Africa. I'm sure you can all agree with me that indeed there are dire consequences if this trade war proceeds as Trump wants. I also look another lesson. Turkey, as I said earlier on, is one of the countries that is having serious crisis. At the beginning of the year, one Turkish lira was worth about 26 cents of US dollars, but now from January to now, the currency of that country has depreciated by more than 20%, by 30%. Data in Q1 in Turkey, it increased by 2% and it is expected to grow by 1.7%. But most importantly, their trade deficit is about 5.5%. Worryingly, their interest rate is 18%. But what interests me the most is the fact that despite all these challenges, unemployment rate in Turkey is 9%, meaning that out of 100 people, 9 are unemployed, compared to what we have in South Africa, as you'll see later on. And beginning of this year, around March again, Trump contemplated that he wants to introduce tariffs on steel and aluminium. And remember, in South Africa, we produce a lot of steel and aluminium sent to China and US. And if those tariffs are being imposed, what will happen to our mining industry? There will be another pandemonium. So here I'm just demonstrating that the currency of Turkey has been depreciating beginning of the year until now. As you can see, it's less than 20 cents against the dollar. Here I'm trying to demonstrate in Turkey, the debts, government debts, as much as they were high, but they are decreasing. And I want to keep this in your long-term memory and see how our debts in the later slides. And coming to my beloved continent. I remember when I was a little boy, we used to sing a song written by a guy called Enoch Sontonga. He wrote a beautiful song called The Holy Spirit Must Come Now, Consider Africa. And I'm not sure what was in his mind, but he had a dream that one day Africa will have bright lights like we saw in Japan, like South Korea. Look in Africa, it's completely dark as if there's no economic activity. You see smaller lights somewhere in Nigeria and the like, and in the Central Africa it's complete pitch black, there's no people. And that is worrying. You scroll down, you see at the bottom, you see some lights, and you tell where are those lights coming from. So with this, again, you come to South Africa. You see so many lights again, but concentrated in one province, which is Gauteng. And then you see some lights in the Western Cape. You see some along the coast, N2 and N3, that is Durban. You see some your PE, your East London. The rest of South Africa is like they are no human beings. So what went wrong to our politicians? When you see these things at night, really this is worrying, and we have the potential for it. So with this slide, I'm trying to show that for a country to prosper, you must produce and sell to the rest of the world. But we are doing the opposite in South Africa. Look, in 1996, 55% of our GDP was coming from the secondary sector, tertiary sector. However, that is increasing to 63%. And my worry is you can't export the services. We should be increasing our production, manufacturing, secondary sector. Instead, it is decreasing from 19% to 17% to 2017. Our agricultural sector, or my primary sector, we've got so much amount of land, mining sector. Again, the contribution by the primary sector is decreasing. And that should be our comparative and competitive advantage. It was once announced by David Ricardo and Adam Smith. My concern is, in a beautiful country like South Africa, we export goods and services. 96% of what we export comes from the primary sector, that is mining. But look what is the contribution by the mining sector. It's about 10% if you combine mining and agriculture. Yet 96% of what we export comes from this. Don't you see that we have a problem? So we need this radical economic transformation. We need this land, but we must use it appropriately. And because of that trade relationship, you will notice that our value of imports are always exceeding our value of exports, all the way from Q1 2014, even currently we are negative. And our trade balance currently is, if you compare the value of goods that we export to those imports, we are importing goods worth 4.6 billion compared to what we export. We have a deficit. Ideally, we must be having a positive sign and not a negative sign. I like what Global Insight has done here. When we took over as the black government in 1994, there was this business conflict that was revived. We saw a lot of foreign direct investors coming to South Africa. As a result, we saw our wealth, they're using per capita GDP, that is the total of output per individual. You can see that it has been, after the foreign direct investment was increasing, and that led to the increase in the wealth or GDP per capita, which is a good thing. We need to boost confidence by foreign investors, then they invest in the country, then we can grow, and we'll see our level of poverty will also decrease, like now it is opposed to what is happening now, whereby it is increasing. If you track again in terms of exports, if you run the vector error correction model, you will notice that there's a co-integration between the value of exports and the GDP and the GDP per capita. They move together. The more you produce and export, the more you improve the income of people, the more you improve the standard of living, and indirectly poverty is decreased. Coming to the figures, I don't want to spend much time here because Dr. Kumar has explained this clearly. Even our Q1 figure was revised. I know it was 2.2, but now it's 2.6. So these two negative growth rates resulted to what we call technical recession. And initially we were expecting the economy to grow by 1.2%, but now that will be revised downward. I've spoken about the technical recession. One of the factors that contributed to this high level of recession was the agricultural sector, which contracted by 29%, transport 4.9%, trade 1.4%, 1.9%. And again, these are significant sectors that will add. Remember, in agriculture, you don't have much skill, you don't need much skill to employ people. We have so much people that are employed, but our agriculture is not growing to attract more people. Obviously, in 2 weeks' time, you will be hearing the monetary policy, Kudu Reserve Bank, announcing their policy stance in terms of monetary policy. I expect them to revise down the growth rate from 1.2% that they had to something less than 1%, as it was done by the Gold Sachs. I like this. You remember 2009, when the former president took over with a recession. Ramaphosa took over in this year, we have a recession. Remember, if you look at the GDP of South Africa, about 60% comes from household, you and I. But now, consumers are having crisis of higher VAT, unemployment rate, so their consumption is decreasing. Definitely to affect the GDP. And the consumer confidence is also decreasing. Again, we saw that momentum in January, but that has always now faded away. Our agriculture, our manufacturing sector industry also contracted by 0.3%. Since January, I remember in January the rand was trading about 11 Rand 50 at some point against the dollar. But as of yesterday, it was as low as 15 Rand 60. And imagine the goods that we buy from the rest of the world. I think Dr. Kumar has explained clearly what are the effects. The price of crude oil. You hear the Minister of Energy on Monday announcing that they will subsidize us. Instead of the price of oil increasing by 25%, it increased by 5 cents. But I remember reading a book in 1979. There were crises in the oil industry. National Party's government intervened. They pegged the price of petrol to 50 cents. Then within 4 months, things started to roll out. And eventually, the price of petrol went up as high as 95 cents. because of government intervention. I'm not trying to be nasty, but I'm skeptical whether it is a good decision to interfere in the market. But I'm also determined that the recently announced stimulus packages that might help in terms of bring the economy back to where it needs to be. Unemployment rate, if you look at the Q2 data, in KZN it was about 36%, 21%, but again expanded 40%. In South Africa, expanded 36%. The worrying factor is unemployment rate is predominant among young people, 40%. And that is very, very sad. If you look at the slide, these young people need to be working, but because of high unemployment rate, they end up doing things that they don't even want to do. And that brings back to the issue of productivity that Mr. Dr. Kumar spoke about, which I'll also touch upon. I've spoken about this. I want us to look at this line, business confidence. You see, this is a boundary line. For the country to prosper, business confidence must be hovering around these 50 points. We saw it beginning of the year increasing, but it is decreasing again. And once business confidence decreases, it means we are losing investment that we need so much in the private sector. And that is adding to our woes that we have in terms of economy. The same is said about consumer confidence. We saw this beginning of the year, that again it must be around here or above. We saw it improving beginning of the year, but now it is falling again because of one major issue is rent and unemployment rate. If you look at this slide, the PMI, this indicator measures the sales volumes by the private sector. It was increasing beginning of the year, but it is falling. Remember, when the sales are decreasing, firms are there to make money. They start cutting production. When they cut production, they cut jobs. And again, back to square one. So this index is very critical, and again, is going southward. We want it to go upward. Over and above this problem that we have, you know that we learn in Economics 101. For the country to prosper, it must save and spend in investment. But the saving rate in South Africa is about 13% compared to other countries. And because of low savings rate, we rely heavily on foreign direct investors to inject their money into our economy that we can spend in capital formation. But when the investors see the economy shrinking, what they do, they withdraw their money. And if you notice on Tuesday morning, soon after the announcement, the rand depreciated significantly because investors were pulling their money out and the rand depreciated significantly. Yes, we are a spending nation, which is good to boost our economy, but the problem is our spending as household is financed by debt. If you look at the Reserve Bank quarterly bulletin, they say each and every rand that I earn as a consumer, 72 cents finances my debts, paying my car, my home loan, etc. Only 22 cents is left for me to spend on consumption. For how long will I survive with this? That is again another problem that we have. Q2 data came out on Tuesday. I remember vividly in end of July reading the report by National Treasury saying that tax revenue were less than what they were projected. If you look at the quarterly data, they must collect 25% and above. But in the first 3 months of this financial year, that is from April to May, SARS collected about 22% of what they were supposed to collect. Okay, instead of 25%. And that created an under-collection of 5 billion. And that comes straight to you as CFOs. Because there will be little money coming from National Treasury. How are you going to fund your expenditures? So the poor performance by the economy has affected our revenue collection, and that will affect what we get from National Treasury. I remember again this acting SARS commissioner When he took over, or in June again, early June, he said, I want to increase tax collection by 20% per annum. And he was benchmarking with India, China, and other countries. We are talking about 20%, 17%, increasing by 20%. He said, I'll be increasing mine by 20%. Will he be able to do that under this condition? Again, that is another concern. So, because of lower tax revenue, government is forced to implement what is called fiscal consolidation, cutting expenditure. But my worry is, I also look at our own provincial treasury. We are cutting from infrastructure, building of roads, building of schools, etc. And research or evidence across the globe says spend more on infrastructure to grow the economy. We are spending less, but on infrastructure we're spending more on compensation of employees. I remember, I won't mention a municipality, I was looking for the Eastern Cape. One municipality was given conditional grant. You know what conditional grant is? It is meant for that particular purpose. That municipality spent that money on compensation of employees. And I asked the question, what were these guys doing if you didn't spend that money? There was no answer. And that is a problem. So because of these crises that we have, we saw the momentum beginning of the year. Remember in March and June, our favorite credit rating Moody's revised our outlook from negative to positive. And they still, this is like investment grade, this investment grade or non-investment grade, that is called junk status. Only Moody's has got us one notch above investment grade. And the two fellows, Standard & Poor and Fitch, they still have us below investment grade, junk status. So with the data that came out, I was reading last night, they're also revising their rating. So I don't know really what to do. So looking at this, all these issues, really we are facing a problem as a country. Hence I concur with Dr. Kumar that we must look at what we spend and what we spend on and how we spend. Let us look at the economy of KwaZulu-Natal. I've already spoken about this. What worries me about our economy? I've got this line here, is the growth rate in population, 1.2%. This line is what we have in GDP and in IDPs, that we want to grow the economy by 5%. We have the potential of growing our economy by about 3%. We actually did that around 2007, 2006. It grew by 1.5%. But after the contraction in 2009, we are growing our economy below our target, we are growing our economy below our potential, and currently we are slightly above the growth rate in the population growth. But again, that's not enough. Population growth is 1.2%, and we expect our economy to grow by another 1%. There is a mismatch. The same problem that we have in national still have in KZN. Most of our economy is concentrated on the tertiary sector. As a result, we are not exporting what we should be. I know I'm being cynical, but I will say it anyway. Let us look at these three provinces, Western Cape, KZN, and Gauteng. These figures are population contribution to okay. Smanga messed with my data. This is 56 million, sorry, at rand. Total population in South Africa. Western Cape contributes 11.4% of these 56 million in South Africa. KZN contributes 19.7%. Gauteng 24.2%. What is interesting is Western Cape, or the KZN, Gauteng, in terms of GDP, of the 3.1 trillion of GDP that was getting last year, Gauteng contributed 35%, higher than their contribution in population. See the mismatch? The same with Western Cape. They contribute goods and services worth 13.8% of the total national GDP. And in terms of population, they contributed 11.4. Again, this is less than this. Coming to my beloved province, in terms of GDP, we contribute 16%, but in terms of population, 19%. That now creates the high dependency ratio. That is why even our grant recipients in KZN are far higher than those from other provinces. I have already spoken about this slide. Dr. Kumar spoke about this productivity. This is what is, by the way, this KZN, but the same trend in South Africa. This is the growth rate in remuneration. 5.1% last year, 5.9% last year, salary increment on average. But in terms of productivity, we are not growing, we are decreasing, opposite. An ideal situation, these curves should be moving together, or this above this. This, what it says is, I employ you, I pay you 100 rand per day, but instead of producing value, you are eating my revenue by 1 cent. Does it make sense? So imagine an investor looking at this, you'll never see his face. So Dr. Kumar said a lot about productivity, and he explained why, how we can get that right. Stay away from politics, get the right people to do a job. Focus on what you're being paid for. Nothing else, procedures. So if you look at these issues all together, what do we do to the budget? Let us look at this current financial year, 2018-19. Government is planning to collect revenue worth 1.5 trillion rand, minus the 5 billion that we didn't collect in the first quarter. We're already in debt anyway. And we intend to spend 1.7 trillion rand. And that creates a budget deficit of 180 billion rand, money that was borrowed by government. And look at this, it means our budget deficit is 3.6% versus the economic growth of expected 0.8%. You see the mismatch already. We spend money that we don't have. In future, we still have to pay that money back. And the trend over the medium term is still the same, 3.6, 3.5. We'll be spending more than what we are collecting in terms of revenue. Here is my worry. If you look at the stock of debts by government currently owes about 2.8 trillion rand. This amount is equivalent to 55% of GDP. Technically, we're insolvent. Yeah. we owe less than what we have. Our balance sheet is not looking good. And remember, when you borrow money, you can bring it out. They look at the balance sheet and the cash flow statement. The cash flow, you saw the cash flow previous slide. Cash flow statement is not good. The balance sheet is not good. So what happened? The credit rating is punishing us. We borrow at a higher interest rate. I remember in 1997, I was a very young, good-looking guy working for the bank. The country was experiencing crisis. Prime rate was 25%. And I remember I was a credit analyst there. Guys were borrowing money using their investment as collateral. There's a woman that cried tears in front of me. That lady stood surety of her son. She gave us her investment certificate worth 100,000 rand in the beginning of 1996, 7 years. The son didn't pay the monthly installment. In June, we have to recall the loan. Then we recalled the investment that was settled with us. Guess what? Because of the economic event, the 100,000 rand worth investment in January was worth 45,000 rand in June. That lady cried in front of me. I was very, very young. I was shivering. What do I do? I wouldn't say anything. I'm trying to clearly say how is economy affecting investment, how is it affecting our finances. So if you look at this figure, 180 billion rand, we are not paying back the money. We are just servicing the debt. 180 billion, which is 3.6% of the GDP. Remember, economy is growing by less than 1%, but what we pay servicing debt is 3.6% of what we generate. So where is the cash flow in the future? So if you look at the debt accumulation, this is, I would be sitting nicely if our economy was growing on an average of 14.1% per year. But if you look at the debt's cost, they have been increasing all the way, 14%. But the economy is doing the opposite. The debt costs are growing fastest compared to all other what we do in terms of revenue collection. And that is again another problem. If you recall, prior to the crisis in 2007, we were spending, this is our revenue, we were collecting more than what we spend. We were able to, we had so much contingency reserves. That is why the recession in 2007 was not that severe, it was mild because of what we had. But now, our expenditure is exceeding our revenue. We are hoping that this trend will close, but not very soon. You look at our provincial economy. Each and every municipality, each and every province must generate its own revenue. But we don't have enough capacity. We saw the data. In KZN, we've got something called equitable share, which is made up of 7 components, or 5 rather. KZN, remember, population were large, GDP were large, we are small, but in terms of benefiting, we are the highest. We get 21% of all revenue that is distributed across provinces. Yet we generate less than what other provinces are generating. And when you go to National Treasury, sit down with people from different provinces, they fight strongly against it. We produce more, how can we get more? But again, our poverty rate is very, very high. Our literacy rate is very, very high. We have about 11.5 million people in South Africa. Of that 11.5 or 6 million, 1.2 have medical aids. The rest don't have, and rely on state health or state government health services. That is why we are getting more in terms of health. We have so many kids going to school, and again they're getting more compared to other provinces. Economically, Gauteng is getting more, but remember, that is only 1%. If you add all this, they add 100%, 45%. And if you look at these components, they're all population driven. In terms of economy, they were very smart, only 1%. And we are contributing 16%. That is why we talk about equity. Imagine if income was shared equally. Look at this. By the way, this Friday, Saturday, South Africa will playing Libya. I'll be taking my son to the stadium. Imagine when the crowd gets excited, will my son enjoy the view? We are all equal. But now in terms of the view, we are not. Hence, as government, we have GDP or these objectives. Hence, we say resources must be shared equitably. That is why I have to put more to my son so that he enjoys the benefit. We have to put more to the poor, free education, health, etc., so that they can also enjoy the little that we have as a country. I will conclude by highlighting that based on the data that we have seen, our province is getting 122 billion of the total revenue generated nationally. That is the end of my story. Thank you so much.